Today, we're looking at the case of a young man who married a woman twice his age to stay in the United States. Everyone warned her. She didn't listen. And then, one night, he vanished without taking anything with him.
DuPage County, Illinois, 2017.
Ajay Malik was 32 years old when he arrived in the United States in November 2016. He entered on a temporary employment visa through a mid-size IT staffing firm that placed foreign specialists on rotating corporate contracts across the Chicago suburbs. Ajay held a computer science degree from a private university in northern India and had built a resume around routine, low-visibility work: system support, back-end troubleshooting, weekend maintenance windows. People who worked with him described a man who rarely raised his voice and rarely shared details. He dressed plainly, kept his desk uncluttered, and stored documents in labeled folders. He was punctual to the minute. His visa was valid for 1 year, with renewal dependent on sponsorship and continuous project placement. At the time he arrived, neither was guaranteed, and he treated that uncertainty as a problem to be managed rather than discussed. Linda Carter was 60 years old and had lived most of her adult life in the same county. She was twice divorced and recently retired from a long career in insurance administration, where she had handled claims processing and compliance paperwork. Financially, she was stable. Her home was paid off, her credit was strong, and she maintained savings that reflected decades of cautious budgeting. Neighbors described Linda as controlled and private. She kept her front yard trimmed, paid bills early, and tracked expenses in a paper ledger even after online banking became common. She disliked improvisation, preferred plans, and had a reputation for taking pride in not needing help. She also cared intensely about appearances, less about fashion than about being seen as competent, careful, and not easily fooled. On weekends, she drove the same grocery route, bought the same staples, and stored receipts in envelopes by month. Linda's daughter, Emily Carter, was 35 and lived about 2 hours away in central Illinois. She worked in logistics management and handled vendor accounts, shipping schedules, and inventory controls. Emily spoke with her mother several times a week and visited when her workload allowed. Their relationship was close but not frictionless. Emily was protective and direct, especially about finances. She had watched her mother rebuild after 2 divorces and believed Linda's desire to prove independence sometimes pushed her into rigid decisions. Emily's reputation in the family was that she asked hard questions and did not accept vague answers. Ajay and Linda met through an online dating platform marketed toward older adults seeking long-term relationships. Their profiles presented compatibility on paper. Both emphasized stability, seriousness, and routine. Ajay described himself as family-oriented and reserved. Linda described herself as established and looking for a committed partner rather than casual companionship. The age gap was obvious. Linda framed it as unusual but manageable. To friends, she described Ajay as respectful and attentive, someone who listened and did not compete with her. Ajay told coworkers only that he had met someone settled and that the relationship was moving quickly. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Within months, Ajay was spending most nights at Linda's home. He contributed minimally to household expenses, but made himself useful in quiet ways, handling minor repairs, driving when the weather was bad, keeping track of appointments. Linda interpreted this as reliability. The speed of the relationship concerned those close to her. Emily openly questioned Ajay's timing relative to his visa and the imbalance in financial power. Linda dismissed the concerns as prejudice and resentment. She argued with her daughter and reduced contact with several friends who raised similar doubts. In Linda's mind, the criticism confirmed a belief that others did not want to see her make a decision they could not influence. By early 2017, Ajay's contract renewal remained uncertain. Around the same time, he proposed marriage. The proposal was practical and understated, framed around stability, shared life, and doing things properly. Linda accepted. They married in a small civil ceremony at the county courthouse, with no extended family present. Linda informed her social circle afterward, presenting the marriage as a settled personal choice. After the wedding, Linda began integrating Ajay into the parts of her life she had previously controlled alone. She added him as a joint holder on a checking account used for household expenses and began immigration paperwork that would tie his legal future to the marriage. From the outside, the arrangement looked orderly and consensual. Inside the household, the balance of dependency began to shift in ways that were not visible to anyone who only saw them at a distance. In DuPage County in 2017, the marriage looked unconventional, but it still looked like a marriage. By the spring of 2017, the practical consequences of the marriage began to surface. Ajay's employment contract was extended on a short-term basis, but the terms were narrower than before. The staffing firm warned him that future placement would depend on client demand. Renewal of his visa would require uninterrupted sponsorship and proof of continued employment. The margin for error was small. Inside the household, Ajay became increasingly focused on timelines and paperwork. He asked Linda about filing dates, receipt notices, and estimated processing periods. He framed the questions as administrative necessities, not personal urgency. Linda complied. She scheduled consultations, gathered documents, and paid filing fees. The process was familiar to her. Insurance administration had trained her to follow procedures precisely. She kept copies of every form and tracked dates in a notebook. To her, the work reinforced the idea that the marriage was a joint project with a defined path forward. She believed predictability would stabilize the relationship. At the same time, subtle changes in Ajay's behavior became noticeable. He spent more time on phone calls taken in separate rooms or outside the house. The calls were frequent and brief, often late in the evening. Linda did not understand Hindi, but she recognized repetition in his tone and pacing. When she asked who he was speaking to, Ajay answered without irritation but without detail, saying only that he was coordinating with family and acquaintances. He did not volunteer more, and she did not press. Financial patterns shifted next. Linda noticed that the balance in their joint checking account declined more quickly than expected. The withdrawals were small and regular, never large enough to trigger bank alerts or overdrafts. At first, she assumed routine expenses. She reviewed statements closely, comparing them against her receipts. The amounts did not match household spending. When she asked Ajay, he explained that he had transferred money for personal obligations and would replace it. He reminded her that the account was joint. The explanation was technically correct. Linda accepted it but began checking the account daily. In June 2017, Linda overheard a phone conversation that altered her understanding of the marriage. Ajay was speaking in Hindi, pacing in the hallway outside the bedroom. Several times, he switched to English, using terms Linda recognized immediately: visa, money, after approval, and leave. The words were not part of a translation exercise or casual reference. They were delivered as conclusions. When the call ended, Ajay returned to the bedroom and spoke to Linda as usual. He did not acknowledge the conversation. Linda did not confront him that night. She reviewed bank statements instead. With assistance from a branch representative, she confirmed that the regular transfers were going to an account opened solely in Ajay's name.
The transfers were structured to appear routine and modest. There was no evidence of fraud. The authority to move the funds came from the joint account agreement she had signed. The realization did not arrive as anger. It arrived as alignment. The warnings she had dismissed before the wedding, the urgency around paperwork, the diminishing intimacy after the filings began, each detail now fit into a single explanation. Linda contacted Emily and described the financial transfers. Emily responded bluntly, stating that this was what she had feared. The conversation escalated into an argument. Linda ended the call without resolution. A confrontation followed later that week. Linda asked Ajay directly whether the marriage was temporary. Ajay did not deny it. He stated that the arrangement had benefits for both of them and that the situation did not need to be dramatic. He said he would leave after his status was secured and suggested that the financial losses were minor in the context of her overall stability. The tone was controlled, not apologetic. From that point forward, the household changed. There were no further discussions about the future beyond logistics. Linda did not contact friends or family. She canceled appointments related to immigration paperwork, but did not inform Ajay immediately. She continued daily routines, paid bills, and tracked account activity. The marriage had shifted from a shared project to a private reckoning, with consequences that would not be visible until a decision was made and acted upon. The weeks that followed were marked by outward normalcy and internal compression. Linda maintained her routines with precision. She woke at the same hour, prepared meals on schedule, and continued tracking expenses in her ledger. To anyone observing from the outside, the household appeared unchanged. Ajay continued leaving for work assignments and returning in the evenings. Conversations were limited to logistics. There were no raised voices, no visible conflict, and no attempts at reconciliation. Behind that stability, the pressure accumulated. Linda replayed the sequence repeatedly. The warnings before the wedding, the arguments that followed, the choice to proceed anyway. She had defended the marriage as a rational decision and positioned herself as someone who could not be misled. The idea that Ajay would leave after securing his status did not register to her as betrayal alone. It registered as exposure. If he left, the narrative would revert to the one she had rejected, and she would have no way to correct it. Ajay continued transferring money from the joint account. The amounts remained consistent and deliberately unremarkable. Linda did not stop him. She documented each transfer and confirmed balances daily. At no point did she contact law enforcement or attempt to close the account. The authority to act was available to her. She chose not to use it. Instead, she began to think in terms of finality rather than resolution. Communication between Linda and Emily resumed briefly in early July. Linda disclosed that Ajay intended to leave once his paperwork was complete. Emily urged her to consult an attorney and separate finances immediately. Linda declined. She ended the call by stating that she would handle it. After that conversation, contact between them paused again. The point of no return came quietly. Linda reviewed Ajay's immigration timeline and confirmed that the next filing step was imminent. She also confirmed that withdrawal of sponsorship would expose her decision-making to scrutiny she no longer felt capable of managing. In her reasoning, delay equaled loss of control. She did not articulate this to anyone else. On the evening of July 18, 2017, Linda prepared dinner as usual. Ajay ate without comment. Later that night, she added a crushed quantity of prescription sleep medication to his drink. The medication had been prescribed to her months earlier for short-term insomnia. The dose exceeded the prescribed amount, but was not lethal on its own.
The purpose was impairment, not poisoning. Ajay became drowsy within minutes. He lay down and did not resist when Linda removed the glass. When she checked his responsiveness, he did not answer. At that point, the sequence became deliberate. Linda placed a pillow over his face and applied pressure until his breathing stopped. There was no prolonged struggle. The medication prevented coordinated movement and defensive reaction. Death resulted from mechanical asphyxia. Linda did not contact emergency services. She remained in the house until morning, following the same schedule she had kept for years. At 6:42 a.m., she called Emily and stated only that something had happened and that she needed help. Emily arrived several hours later. She assessed the situation without contacting authorities. The decision to conceal the death was mutual. Emily believed Ajay had exploited her mother financially and emotionally. Linda believed disclosure would confirm the judgment she had spent years resisting. They moved the body using Emily's vehicle later that evening. The destination was an industrial area on the outskirts of the county used intermittently for construction staging and waste storage. The body was left among discarded materials where it would not be immediately visible. The following day, Linda reported Ajay missing, stating that he had left the house after an argument and not returned. The report contained no claims of violence and no timeline beyond the previous night. At that stage, the account did not trigger immediate suspicion. What followed would not depend on emotion or narrative control. It would depend on records, timestamps, and the absence of expected confirmations that normally follow a voluntary departure. The missing person report filed on July 19, 2017, initially moved through routine channels. Ajay Malik was recorded as an adult male with a temporary immigration status, no documented medical issues, and no prior involvement with law enforcement. Linda Carter stated that he had left the house late the previous evening following a verbal argument and had not returned. She did not describe threats, physical conflict, or unusual behavior beyond the disagreement. The report was classified as a voluntary absence pending confirmation. Standard checks over the following days produced no immediate contradictions. Ajay's mobile phone ceased all activity shortly before midnight on July 18th. His personal vehicle remained parked at the residence. His passport was not located inside the house, which Linda explained by stating that he often carried it with him. Bank and credit card records showed no transactions after the date of disappearance. At that stage, the absence of activity was not considered conclusive. The first procedural concern emerged when Ajay failed to report to his staffing firm. Missed shifts were not uncommon among contractors, but complete loss of contact was. The firm documented the absence and initiated internal compliance steps related to his visa sponsorship. Immigration authorities confirmed that no departure from the United States had been recorded and that no further filings had been made on Ajay's behalf. His legal status entered a lapse period, which shifted the profile of the case away from voluntary travel. By mid-August, the lack of any confirmed movement, financial, digital, or geographic, prompted detectives to reclassify the case as suspicious. Subpoenas were issued for phone records, banking data, and vehicle location history. The resulting timeline narrowed Ajay's last known activity to the evening of July 18th, with no evidence of movement beyond the residence afterward. Emily Carter was contacted as part of the expanded inquiry. She acknowledged visiting her mother on July 19th, but initially described the visit as routine. Investigators noted inconsistencies between her statements and vehicle data that placed her car near an industrial staging area outside the county that evening. When confronted with the discrepancy during a follow-up interview, Emily became visibly distressed and requested legal counsel. The interview was suspended.
2 days later, Emily contacted investigators through her attorney and requested to provide a formal statement. During the recorded interview, she admitted that Ajay Malik had died in Linda's home on the night of July 18th. She stated that her mother had called her the following morning and told her that Ajay was dead. Emily confirmed that she had come to the house, seen the body, and assisted in removing it. She identified the location where the body had been left and described the sequence of events leading to its disposal. Her statement was detailed, chronological, and corroborated by vehicle data. Based on Emily's confession, search warrants were issued for the identified industrial site. Investigators also obtained a warrant for Linda Carter's arrest. Linda was taken into custody without incident. During her initial interview, she did not deny responsibility for Ajay's death. She stated that he had been sedated and suffocated during the night and that she had not contacted emergency services. She described the act as intentional but denied having planned it in advance. She confirmed that Emily had assisted in moving the body. At that point, the case no longer depended on inference or absence. It rested on sworn admissions, recorded timelines, and a location that could now be examined. The remaining task for investigators was recovery, confirmation, and reconstruction, steps that would convert confession into prosecutable fact. Recovery operations began within hours of Emily Carter's formal statement. The industrial staging area she identified was located on the outskirts of DuPage County, a zone used intermittently by private contractors for material storage and waste handling. The site had no permanent security and limited camera coverage. Access logs were informal and incomplete. Search teams cordoned off the area and began a grid-based sweep focused on the coordinates and landmarks Emily had described. Ajay Malik's remains were located beneath construction debris less than a day into the search. The body showed no signs of environmental trauma inconsistent with post-mortem placement. Identification was confirmed through dental records and fingerprint comparison. The remains were transferred to the county medical examiner for full autopsy. The autopsy established the cause of death as mechanical asphyxia. There were no defensive injuries, no fractures, and no evidence of a prolonged struggle. Toxicology testing revealed the presence of a prescription sedative in Ajay's system at a concentration sufficient to cause deep sedation and motor impairment, but not death. Ajay had no prescription history for the substance. The findings were consistent with incapacitation prior to suffocation. Investigators reconstructed access to the medication through pharmacy and medical records. Linda Carter had been prescribed the sedative several months earlier for sleep disturbance. Refill timing and pill counts indicated recent use inconsistent with her reported consumption. Combined with the toxicology results, the pharmaceutical record established opportunity and means without reliance on household items or residual physical traces. Digital forensics further reinforced the timeline. Ajay's phone showed its final activity inside the residence on the evening of July 18th. No location data placed him elsewhere after that point. Vehicle records confirmed Emily Carter's car traveling from Linda's residence to the industrial site and returning the same night. Bank records showed that transfers from the joint account ceased immediately after Ajay's death. There were no subsequent attempts by him to access funds, housing, or employment. Linda Carter was interviewed following her arrest with counsel present. She confirmed the core elements of Emily's statement. She acknowledged administering the sedative, suffocating Ajay while he was incapacitated, and choosing not to seek medical assistance. She stated that she acted after concluding that Ajay intended to leave once his immigration process advanced, and that he had been diverting money from their joint account. She denied premeditation beyond the decision made that evening. The investigative file now contained converging lines, a confession from a participant, corroborated movement data, medical findings consistent with the described method, and financial records supporting motive. There was no evidence of third-party involvement, forced entry, or alternative causes of death. The sequence was internally consistent and externally verified. With recovery complete and forensic conclusions documented, the case transitioned from investigation to prosecution. Charging decisions were drafted based on the established record, and the matter was scheduled for grand jury consideration. The factual phase of the case had closed. What followed would be determined not by discovery, but by statutory definitions, evidentiary standards, and the weight assigned to actions taken after the moment Ajay Malik lost his life. Formal charges were filed in September 2017. Linda Carter was indicted on 1 count of second-degree murder and 1 count of concealment of a human corpse. Emily Carter was charged separately with concealment of a human corpse and obstruction of justice. Prosecutors declined to pursue first-degree murder, citing the absence of long-term premeditation and the lack of planning prior to the evening of July 18th. The case proceeded in the Circuit Court of DuPage County. Pre-trial motions focused on the admissibility of confessions and digital evidence. Defense counsel for Linda argued that her statements were the product of emotional distress and should be limited in scope. The court denied suppression, ruling that the interviews were conducted with counsel present and without coercion. Emily's recorded statement was admitted in full after the court determined it had been voluntarily given through her attorney and corroborated by independent evidence. At trial, the prosecution framed the case as a sequence of deliberate decisions rather than an impulsive act. The jury was presented with a narrow timeline: the financial transfers, the confrontation, the administration of the sedative, the failure to call emergency services, and the coordinated disposal of the body. Expert testimony established that Ajay Malik would have been incapable of resistance due to pharmacological impairment, and that death resulted from sustained airway obstruction. The defense did not contest the cause of death. Instead, it emphasized emotional collapse, humiliation, and fear of abandonment. Linda Carter did not testify. Emily Carter took the stand briefly, acknowledging her role in moving the body and stating that she believed her mother would otherwise lose everything. Cross-examination focused on her decision to assist rather than report the death. After 9 days of testimony, the jury returned its verdict. Linda Carter was found guilty on both counts. Emily Carter was found guilty of concealment of a human corpse and acquitted on obstruction of justice. Sentencing occurred 6 weeks later. Under Illinois law, second-degree murder carries a sentencing range of 4 to 20 years. The court cited aggravating factors, including abuse of trust, financial motive, and post-offense concealment. Mitigating factors included Linda's lack of prior criminal history and the absence of long-term planning. Linda Carter was sentenced to 18 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections for second-degree murder, followed by a concurrent 5-year sentence for concealment of a human corpse. She was required to serve at least 85% of the sentence before eligibility for release. Emily Carter was sentenced separately. The court acknowledged her cooperation and lack of prior convictions. She received a sentence of 4 years imprisonment for concealment of a human corpse, with credit for time served and eligibility for supervised release after completing half the term. Ajay Malik's immigration case was formally closed following the conviction. His employer terminated sponsorship retroactively, and his estate was repatriated to family members in India. Financial accounts tied to the marriage were frozen and redistributed according to probate findings. No civil reforms or procedural changes followed the case. The mechanisms that enabled the crime, financial authority within marriage, immigration dependency, and delayed scrutiny of adult disappearances, remained unchanged.
The record closed with 2 prison sentences, 1 death, and a sequence of decisions that, once set in motion, could not be reversed.